So I am joined by the absolutely irreplaceable, inimitable Raymond Benson, who I have been so excited to speak to for such a long time. Oh my God, you've written the Felix Leiter book.
I have indeed.
I read the first chapter and I absolutely adored it. It's one of those things. Sometimes I read so many books by so many different authors. A lot of them are self-published, and sometimes you'll pick up a book and you'll be like, oh, this is what writing about. It's like, oh, this is a professional. It's like someone who gets on a horse. You can immediately see they know what they're doing. And I was just like, that first line is a killer, holding fate of the world in his hands, and he doesn't know what to do with it. So I absolutely adored it. Oh, I have so many questions. I remember I was bombarding you before the last time we spoke. I was like, oh, you need to write a Felix Leiter book. You need to write a Felix Leiter book. Apparently you had it all going on in the background.
Yeah, I had to keep. Yeah, this has been going on a while. I had to keep it a secret. I think, we really started it in late spring last year. I wrote it pretty much over the summer last year, and it went into editing in the fall, and then went to the IFP's board of directors in like December. And then, it got all approved at the beginning of the year. And then we've been working on how to, the whole marketing rollout and getting the cover design, the cover. I love Thomas Gilbert's cover is amazing. It's just
now,
really
is that a Packard Mayfair we see zooming down the street?
That's a Packard. Yeah.
Yes. I love my old American cars as well. So it's like, to me, it's like somebody listened to everything I wanted in a book and just made it happen. Well, that's you. That's
well, I appreciate that. So you've read episode 1, the whole first 4 chapters.
Yeah. Yes. And I mean, I have so many questions just about writing a James Bond book must be such a challenge anyway, because of everything that comes before it. And now you've got like this sandbox to play in, but the choices you made, like writing it first person perspective, I loved it. As soon as I started reading it, it was classic Benson noir, like Gumshoe. I could almost hear the jazz soundtrack in the background, but it sucks you in immediately. And in that first chapter itself, just as he's walking across Manhattan, not only do you get a walking tour of Manhattan in the 1950s, you also get, all of the relevant details about who Felix Leiter is. And it's like drinking a nice cold beer after you burn the lawn all day, just that feeling of refreshment.
Well, thank you. Yeah. I've always thought that if you don't grab the reader in the first few pages, then you might as well give up, because if you're trying to sell a book to, like, say, an agent, or it's being submitted to an editor at a publisher, they look at the first 2 or 3 pages, and if they're not sucked in, goes in the pile. It goes in the reject pile. That's just the way it is. Sometimes they only read the first page. Sometimes they only read the first paragraph.
You'd have done fine in that case.
Well, I've tried to do that with all my books leading up to this, but I really worked hard on this one. I really wanted to hone it and get it right.
So, I think I don't know if IFP know remotely who I am. If I do, I'm that annoying person who did the petition about don't censor the James Bond books. But I love what they've been doing in terms of, they have Kim's trilogy, and they've got Vasim Khan coming in with his Q trilogy, and then they have hopefully this is just the start of something amazing. But I love what they're doing. They're giving us like a catalog where you can a step into the James Bond world or something, except it's not like the MCU. I think everyone has their own little playgrounds, but it's so nice. So you could go in and pick something up that fits you like a glove. And I just love reading. What I loved about reading it was it's such good Benson. I love your Black Stiletto series is so good, and you're such a master of noir. And then it's like you're writing this book that's an officially licensed James Bond book, and yet it has everything about that is so wonderful about your writing that you didn't necessarily have the opportunity to explore with your original James Bond books. And so it's so you, and it's also so James Bond.
Yeah, well, the Felix is much closer to me as a character, as a person, than James Bond ever would be. I really had to, back in those days, that was 25, almost 30. It was 30 years ago almost that I was asked to do the Bond. novels. And, I had to learn to write British. They wanted, at that time, they wanted me to write as if I was a British author, with all the British spellings and terminology and everything. So that was a big learning curve for me. And, I think I knew the Bond character very, very well because, I basically had been immersed in Fleming since I was 9 years old in the 60s. I've read the books over and over and over many, many times, as well as, seen the movies many, many times. So I think I knew the character very well, what he could do, what he couldn't do, how he would speak, and that kind of thing. But it was an alien person to me. But this guy is much more me, I guess,
Well, that's why it always seemed like such a natural fit. I mean, you're from Texas and
exactly.
You've traveled all over the world. You've lived in New York City. You live in Chicago now. You've been all over the place. So, I mean, there are definite parallels, aren't there?
Right. And I think I've known guys like this. I mean, he's from a different generation than me, of course. And so he would have a fairly different world outlook, but I think I know this guy, and I think I always have. I've always been a fan of Felix Leiter, especially the Fleming version of Felix, because we've never really had Fleming's version of Felix in the movies.
No.
And I don't mean to, denigrate any of the actors who have played Felix, but they've all been different, and they've all been, they've never been a consistent presentation of the character. They've all been different tones and personalities. And Fleming's Felix he's more of a joker. He's very much very, very buoyant and upbeat all the time. In his scenes with Bond in the books, they're like, they're constantly kidding each other and trying to drink each other under the table. And Felix is always mansplaining to Bond America,
Yes.
Oh, we got to do this. We got to go up to Harlem and do this. And you got to drink this. You'll love it, and, order this off the menu, man. It's great. They bring it in from here and there and blah, blah, blah. He's a very, lovable sidekick, but now he's front and center.
Absolutely. And I mean, did you have like an open sandbox when you came up with this, or did you have any direction from IFB about?
No, it was totally mine. I wanted to do it this way in the 50s, in between Live and Let Die and Diamonds Are Forever. Start off with his mishap.
Yeah.
And go from there. And because I think it's an important part of his character. It's what kind of defines him in the later books. I just thought it would be interesting and fun, and doing the period research and giving Felix more of a depth. And I mean, you're going to learn a lot more about Felix as the book goes on, about his background and even home life and childhood.
I'm so excited about it. I mean, the thing is, you have him 10 months after the most traumatic incident of his life. I mean, his life is irreparably changed by what happened in Live and Let Die. 10 months isn't even that long, is it?
Right. No, it isn't. And I consulted the prosthetics doctor. How long would it take really for, the stumps to heal and all that? And when would he get the prosthetics? And what I've described was accurate. And I investigated the kinds of prostheses he would get, and it wasn't a pirate hook, which is kind of what I envisioned as a kid when I read the books. I'm going, what? He has a hook,
I know that all sounded pretty cool to me, actually.
Yeah, but come on, that wouldn't have been practical, and in the 50s that wouldn't have been the case. Maybe 100 years ago, that's probably what people would have had. But, I don't know if you've ever seen The Best Years of Our Lives, the movie.
No, I haven't. Oh, wait, no, I have. Yes. Where the chap's got no hands.
Yeah, right.
Yes, no, I have watched that movie. That was an incredible movie.
Yeah, it was the Oscar Best Picture that year. And that actor, Harold Russell, won the supporting actor Oscar
And he
for his
wasn't
role.
even an actor, was he? He was.
No, he wasn't. And then he got an honorary Oscar the same night because they probably thought he wasn't going to win the supporting actor, so they'd give him one anyway. So he went home with two. But what he has on his arms, that's what Felix would have had. The exact same thing. Because it wasn't that many years after that. You know, that's only like, what, 5-6 years. The prosthetics would not have changed that much.
No. And I mean, one of the amazing things reading that is, you know, Felix is thinking about how he's probably just looking like another wounded veteran, because you would have had them in the 1952. It's only 7 years after World War II. You would have had people with horrible injuries just out there.
Yep.
And that it's so fascinating because you have this character who's only got these few little snippets that bring absolute joy when you're reading the books. I think you talk about the friendship, and I think one of the things that appeals to men about reading the James Bond books, and those elements especially, is, you know, in this day and age they go on about the male loneliness epidemic, and it's really good to have friends and to have a friend you really, really like. And I think that's one of the things you read. You can see Ian Fleming, like, I think he might have been quite a melancholy person, but when he writes about his friendship with Felix and other people like Karen Bear and stuff like that, there's something magical and joyous about it.
Right. Well, you know, when I wrote the James Bond Bedside Companion, that's one of the big themes that I talk about all through the books, is the theme of friendship.
Yeah.
That Bond really requires, he needs that male bonding friendship. He gravitates toward it when he has an ally in wherever he's in, and you know, so they can share meals and drinks and stories and stuff, you know. It's very important. And you know, Felix is probably his best friend, you know, outside of the service. You know, Bill Tanner is supposed to be like his best friend in the UK, but Felix is probably the guy, you know. So, and I knew Ernest Cuneo, and I really think Fleming may have sort of based the relationship between Bond and Felix on Fleming's relationship with Cuneo, because he was Fleming's closest American friend. You know, they met in 1941, I believe, 40 or 41, and were, you know, very different personalities, but they just, you know, maybe opposites attract or whatever. But their relationship was very, very much a kidding back and forth. You know, Ernie called it guying each other. We were always guying each other, and so yeah, I think, you know, but you know, Felix, his name, Felix is Ivor Bryce's middle name.
Oh, that makes, I didn't know that. That immediately clicked.
And Leiter comes from a couple of American couple that he knew, Thomas and Marion Leiter, who were friends of his in Washington, D.C. And you'll note that what's the name of the secretary at the CIA office in New York in my book?
Hang on. No, you have to tell me because I've forgotten.
It's Marion.
Yes. Wait, I mean, you must have such fun putting these things in.
Yeah, there's little Easter eggs all through it. Little nudge, nudge, wink, winks.
Which I love, and they're not overt. I think when a lot of us aspiring writers, we write stuff, we like shoehorn James Bond references into what we write, and then it's nice to read. Yours is very elegant, very subtle, a certain restraint, but it's very rewarding to read that way.
Yeah, well, thanks.
I think being a Brit living in America, I have good American friends, and there's something really refreshing as a British person, because we're slightly reserved. And you know, my best British friend, we won't see
you reserved.
Well, maybe I'm a bad example of that, but you know, you see someone and you haven't seen them for 10 years, and you shake your hands, and it's like, how are you? And they go, oh, I'm fine, and that's it. But Americans tend to be more open, and there's something really delightful about that as a British person, having an American friend, because you've got that layer of reservedness gets stripped away, and you can really be yourself with someone. You can feel comfortable being yourself around an American friend that you can't necessarily feel with a British friend.
Well, that may be true. I don't know if I've really noticed that, because a lot of my British friends are very gregarious,
Yeah.
and more extroverty.
We do like guying each other. That's
Yeah, I guess so. Maybe.
I think it's, you can tell somebody really likes somebody if they're making constantly, and you have that like witty banter. It's almost like platonic flirting.
Yeah, I guess so. Right.
Yeah.
Well, I have a lot of British friends, and I go over there a lot. I may be going over in the fall for the launch of the book, where we're still working that out, but it's possible.
Yeah. Oh, that'd be right. And so that's one thing. How this entire book is. This is a different way to launch a book. I mean, normally it's like you write a book and the book itself gets published, and then this is building up some momentum, and then it's going to be in print in October. But we've got everything up until then. So, what were the thoughts behind taking this approach?
Well, it's an experiment for sure.
Yeah.
IFP just kind of wanted to try this. They wanted more traffic to their website, and I think they were kind of looking for something to serialize, some kind of thing to go on their site or something. And then when I came along with this proposal to do a Felix Leiter novel, they kind of went ding.
Yeah.
And we talked about it, and we agreed, okay, we can try this. I just hope, a lot of people will read ebooks, so many of the Bond fans, love their print books and love their collection on the shelf, but I do both. I read print books, and I have a Kindle, and I read Kindle books too. And what's beautiful about a Kindle is I can carry all of Ian Fleming's books on my Kindle wherever I go. And if I want to dip into, Honor Majesty Secret Service while I'm in overseas somewhere, I can do it on my Kindle. I don't have to bring a bunch of books with me. You can hold, dozens of books on a Kindle. And then they're always in the cloud. If you can always download it to whatever ones you own, can be downloaded onto the Kindle anytime you want, and then you can take it off and put something else on. So it's a great thing, really.
It's funny because I write romance novels, and romance novels, electronic books is where it's at. I've sold 70,000 copies of my books, but almost all of those were ebooks, because you have these avid female readers who'll read a book a day, and they are purely on the Kindle. And I think us men perhaps were a little slower with that uptick, because there is something really nice. Like, one of my most prized possessions is a copy of The Mad Murders of Marigold Way. It's a beautiful hardback book. Absolutely love it. I stick it on my bookshelf, and I enjoyed sitting down and physically reading it and stuff like that. But I mean, yeah, you have that flexibility with ebooks, and it was great. Yeah, when the Hook Knight came out, the first thing I did was like go to Ian Fleming's website, and I could read the first chapter bonk right there. I didn't need to buy anything, didn't need to go to Barnes and Noble, I didn't need to wait. The problem is, though, it just like whetted your appetite for more, and you're kind of like, okay, when am I going to get the next hit?
Yeah. So we're hoping that a lot of people will read it on the Kindle, and there's going to be a lot of extra value supplements on their website as we go forward. For example, on Tuesday, there's going to be an unpacking the episode video of me talking about episode 1. Kind of like the way streaming television shows do. They'll have, after the show, a little 5-minute thing with the actors talking about the episode that you just saw. We're going to do that for every episode, a week after the drop of each episode. That's going to be called Hooked on Leiter, and it's just me talking a little bit about what went into that episode, my thoughts about it, and how I went about doing it. So that'll drop Tuesday, and then there's going to be some printed content on their website, some essays about Felix, and Q&A with me, and other things. Little surprises and nuggets along the way, all through the summer, all through the serialization.
That sounds, I think that's going to be brilliant. I really hope that's as successful as I think it deserves to be, because I've noticed immediately, everyone I know immediately went on and read the first chapter or the first 4 chapters, and then we can discuss it. And there's a real camaraderie, I think, when you have a friend who's read the same book as you. It's different to watching a TV show, because when you read a book, it's in your head. You conjure up this image. I'm meditating in the world that you created. You envision something, and then I've got my version of it as I read it. And then you talk to your friends, and they have as well. And it's this incredible intimate experience, I think. And that this sounds like it's going to keep things going throughout the summer, and we won't stop talking about it. It's not going to be like a one and done, which I think is what happens with the traditional way of launching books.
Yeah, well, like I said, it's an experiment. We'll see how it works, and I'm excited about it. I mean, it's keeping me engaged all summer,
Yeah.
until it's like I'm having a book launch every 2 weeks.
Which it's a Bensonaissance, we've been calling it. Because I mean, everybody's been talking about your books as well. With the last year, with the release of, it was just digital only, but it was all 6 of your James Bond books. So that was
the omnibus ebook.
Yeah, and that's a great, because I mean, I have those physical books, and I think they take up that much room on my shelf, especially like the big editions. And now you can take them everywhere. But it's got people talking about it, and people are reading them, and new people who've never read these books before are reading them. And
right. I am finding that a younger generation are discovering my books, and the response is pretty good. So. Yeah, it's exciting. It is a renaissance for me, and here I am back in bondage.
Back in bondage. I love that.
After 25 years, so yeah, it is. It's. I'm very grateful too. I mean, I don't take it for granted. The fact that the Fleming family and his heirs and IFP have entrusted me with all this is just, like I made a post yesterday for Ian's birthday.
Yes, I read that.
Saying I'm still pinching myself that I'm here, doing this, So, and they're great people. I mean, I worked with a completely different team back in my Bond days. It was Peter Jansen Smith who was the head of it, and
he was a contemporary of Fleming, wasn't he? So
he was his agent, his literary. Yeah. So he had been running the literary business up until around the time I finished. So it was like 2002 or so that he resigned. I don't remember the exact year, 2001 or 2002, one of those. But he was, he was getting up in age. It was time for him to retire. But he kind of saw me, shepherded me into it and stayed with it for, I think, 5 books, and then he was gone. And we, still were in touch until his death. So he was a great man to know. I mean, I owe everything to him. He was a mentor, and he's the one that, picked me out and asked me to do it. So, but now we have a new team at IFP, and they're fantastic. I love what they're doing. They're great to work with, and very open to, my ideas, and I'm open to their ideas, and it's just a great working relationship. Well, you don't always get that with publishers.
No, well, I mean, I'm normally I'm a very cynical about traditional publishing, but Ian Fleming Publications, especially, it's almost like they're an independent publishing house.
They are.
And the stuff they're doing is really exciting. Like, I'm really excited about Vaseem Khan's book, because the Q Mysteries, that sounded interesting, and then I started to find out a little bit more about him, and what a fascinating guy. And then I bought the first book, I can't remember, The Inspector and the Elephant, and I was like, this is a cracking mystery novel. And I'm like, I am now really excited about this. And they're coming up with projects that are unexpected and exciting, and isn't that what you want in a publisher?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, it's fun. What else? You've read the first 4 chapters, then you got to see then his coming back to New York and going to the CIA office, and then joining Pinkerton's.
Yeah, I've always been fascinated by the Pinkerton Detective Agency. I mean, Alan Pinkerton was a Scotsman who came over. He was a chum of it was Abraham Lincoln, wasn't he? They were pretty chummy, and then he created the Pinkerton Detective Agency, and that's, I mean, it's such a romantic, glamorous, sometimes troubling agency that existed. But I mean, it's so cool to read about it and have Felix Leiter part of that.
Right, right. Well, they're building, right off of City Park was this big tall building, and they're not there anymore, of course. But it was a pretty major operation, especially the first half of the 20th century.
Yeah.
Once the FBI really got going, it kind of took a lot of their power away. But like he tells Felix, they're become more of a security agency, rather than a solving, crime and chasing bad guys kind of thing. But Felix might be having to solve a mystery and chase bad guys.
Well, I really hope so. I'd be very disappointed if he doesn't.
Yeah, it might come to that.
But I mean, how did you get into the headspace of that? I mean, I write a lot about veterans because they come back from Iraq or Afghanistan, and it's difficult for them to reintegrate with society, especially if they've had injuries and things like that. I mean, that must be a difficult headspace to get into for Felix, as someone who's tall, vibrant. He's a former Marine, he's a man of action. And then to have these injuries and to be cast out of the CIA and have to approach it. How did you get into that headspace, and how did you manage to keep the thing we love about him, which is his upbeatness and he's not a victim?
Well, I think you'll find as the book goes on, the upbeatness is pretty much when he's with other people. If he's alone, there might be a different story. Just like in that first chapter, he's fairly serious. I mean, he's kind of got a dark humor, kind of cynical quality to what he's saying. You know? And I think that's kind of when he's alone, that's might be more the case. I don't want to get too ahead of myself, or with spoilers, but when he's with people, he's going to be upbeat and show the world that he's okay. And, he's ready to get to work. I think, I took some liberties with Robert Pinkerton II, looking at the guy and going, he could very well be an interesting detective with that prosthesis, because nobody would expect it.
Yes. And he's still a very capable person.
Yeah. And you'll find out that he is. He's got to work on his aim.
I didn't think about. In Game of Thrones, where Jaime Lannister is the best sword fighter ever, gets his sword hand cut off. It's like, and you kind of lose part of your identity of who you are when that happens. Yeah.
So, and the gun he uses and all that, all careful thought went into all that. So,
and that was the other. I mean, I think as James Bond fans, when we read books, we love to see the actual thing. So, I mean, within a few lines, he looks at his Omega bumper watch, and these little details just I love, because you can picture them. And the first thing I did was then Google, what does an Omega bumper watch look like? And as soon as you mentioned the Packard, I was like, oh, I'm so excited about that. And it's a Packard Mayfair, is that?
Yes.
Yeah. And because his Studelac is famous, and every time I see
you're gonna hear about it. You're gonna hear about the Studelac. Don't worry. Patience, my friend.
But what you really nailed something that I thought one of the reasons I think a lot of us guys like the James Bond books is we might be kind of people who we're loners and we didn't necessarily fit in with study. We've got that feeling of being an outsider, and I think Felix, to a certain extent, has that as well. I love what you just said about how, he's a different person when he's alone, but he's gregarious when he's with company. And I think the James Bond books always resonated with me because I think they explored masculinity in a really interesting way and were very authentic. And I can absolutely see it with this book. Again, it was like a window into something that I think is just incredibly rewarding to read. And I'm excited to sort of go further with that, with the dichotomy of, who he is
Well,
when he's alone and who he is when he's with company.
My approach was to, if Ian Fleming had somehow developed an American voice,
yeah,
and written a Felix Leiter novel in between those two books, Live and Let Die and Diamonds Are Forever, around, simultaneously with Moonraker, this would have been the book, because, I think my plot is very Fleming-esque. As you get into it, you'll maybe see that. There are moments of, fantastical kind of things that only Fleming would do, some embracing of the grotesque or, bizarre, especially when it comes to America, because Fleming loved to look at America and point out the curiosities.
Yeah. I was just watching a video today where they were doing the prayer before the NASCAR races, and it was like, we want to thank God for these Dodges and these Fords and for my smoking hot wife. And I was like, you can't really satirize America because it's this wonderful, absurd place, which I absolutely adore because it's got that chaoticness to it. But I'm excited about reading this 1950s America. It's a different world.
Yeah.
I was going to ask about, when you talk about, Felix Leiter, there's a lot of that you see in him. I mean, you're both from Texas and stuff like that, but yeah, he's a man from a different generation, from the South in the 50s. I think when you read Live and Let Die, for example, he's got some robust ideas for the time. And did you find that challenging to write about a character who's, these days, if he was on Twitter, he might get cancelled for some of the things he says.
Well, so would Bond.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So would Fleming. Well, I mean, just because Felix is from Texas doesn't mean he's not a smart guy or sophisticated, because he spent time in Europe.
Yep.
He was a Marine, and we're going to get into some more of, his background. He worked for NATO. He was in the CIA, in the working around NATO in Paris when he met Bond, during the Casino Royale story. He came from Paris, to join Bond there. And then, he lived in Washington, D.C. a while, and now he's living in New York. So he is sort of a misplaced Texan, much the same way I was when I left Texas and lived in New York City for many years, and I lived in Baltimore, and now I live in Chicago. So it does change your world outlook. And I don't have much of a Texas accent, unless you get 2 or 3 beers in me, then you might hear more of a drawl.
I hope to one day experience that.
Yeah. So I think Felix would be the same way. He has a slight, you can hear the South in him, but it's not this sort of, cowboy kind of talk. He's a sophisticated guy. He's educated. So,
yeah.
He's not going to have a huge drawl. Fleming describes it as he's kind of a slow talker and easygoing talker, but he's got this buoyancy to it. So, I can hear the guy,
That's one of the things I think about people who speak slowly is often, they think about what they're saying, and being able to speak slowly gives them more time to think about what they're saying before they say it. I think a lot of us who speak quickly, we often say something and then afterwards we're like, maybe I should have thought about that before it came out of my mouth.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you had the complete sandbox to play with. You said something amazing when we did a previous podcast with you, the Hidden Gems, about writing James Bond books, and it was like, you start with the villain's plot, and that was how you sort of approached writing a James Bond book. Was it the same thing with this?
Well, yeah, pretty much. I mean, I had to have a plot, so I needed to know what Felix was going to get himself into. So, yeah. Of course, I did. You're getting the first hint of it in chapter 4. There, with the spy equipment there in the hotel room. So that's a big sort of flag. of what we're about to get into. So, I can't really talk too much about the plot at this point, but yeah, I had to completely outline the book. I always do that with any of my books. I always do an outline first, and that's where I really work out the plot and all the characters and the twists and the turns and the red herrings. And, that's when I pull my hair out and can't sleep and go through a lot of angst, is because in many ways, writing the outline is writing the book, because it sets out, chapter by chapter, what's going to happen in each chapter. How does the plot progress? What plot details do you get with each successive chapter? And that's what I do. I don't go into dialogue or any of that stuff. It's all plot. And once that's done, then I use that as a blueprint, as a map for writing the book. And of course, I can improvise as I'm writing, especially, with the characters and the dialogue and descriptions and stuff like that, as long as those plot details get in where I want them to get in.
Now that in some ways makes you the perfect author to experiment with serialization with, because I think perhaps Ian Fleming's one of the things that he wasn't so good at necessarily was plotting everything out. And sometimes you'll read like Goldfinger or something, you get to a certain point in your book and you almost feel like, did he get to this point in the book and be like, how am I going to go and take it from here?
Yeah.
Whereas,
Fleming didn't outline. He was a pantser. Yeah. There's plotters and pantsers. I'm sure he had a lot of notes and a lot of ideas that when he sat down to write, of what he was going to do. And he probably had a good idea of where he was going to go with it, but he didn't have an outline. No, he just sat down and started writing. And, I admire writers who can do that. Stephen King is a famous pantser, and, Lee Child is a great pantser. And I know there are many, but there are many who are also plotters too. Jeffrey Deaver, for example, he does a very detailed he calls it an outline. It's really a prose treatment of like 100 pages of his book before he writes the book, so
with experimenting with serialization, you've got to keep people reading and not have that drop off. But
I wrote the book before we divided it into episodes.
Well, one of the things I would say that's characteristic of your writing in particular is your books, every chapter, you finish it and you want to read another one. The Mad Murders of Marigold Way, when I talk to my friends about it, I'm like, every single chapter, you're like, I'll just read this chapter and then I'll go to bed. And then you end on something, you're like, I'll just read the next chapter and then I'll go to bed. And that's why I'm kind of excited with the serialization aspect.
That's a technique of mystery and thriller writing that's been around for ages. You've got to, even Fleming did that. He would end his chapters pretty much on a sort of a cliffhanger where you want to keep going. No, that's what you do. You want the reader to stay up all night, and keep turning the pages. That's the excitement. It's like a roller coaster. So yeah, that's just, you train yourself to be able to do that. I think most of my books do that, the Black Stilettos and all my.
Well, I would say I think we all want that to happen, but not necessarily all of us are able to make that happen. Whereas that is something that is characteristic of what you write. It's not just ending on a cliffhanger. I think every chapter you also there's some nuggets of information that gives you a little dopamine hit, and you're like, you get the reward for reading the chapter. Like, now I understand this, and then it ends on a cliffhanger, and those two work very well in combination with each other.
Yeah. It is a conscious thing.
So I don't want to keep you for forever, but I really want to ask, are there plans for more Felix Leiter adventures, or is it too early to tell? Or
it's too early to tell. Too early to tell.
Yeah.
We want, we have to see how it's received, how it does. It may be a one-off. I don't know. I have no idea.
No, well, I hope not. It's interesting. A lot of books, they're like, oh, this is the first book in a trilogy and we're doing a planned trilogy. And I think that happens in movies a lot. Whereas there's so much buzz with people. People are so excited about it. And it's kind of, we're all nervous. We want to support it because we want more.
Well, good. Talk it up, for everybody listening, put reviews on Amazon or whatever, and keep it going. That's the only way it'll happen is if there's a big response. So,
well, we will make sure to make as big a response as we possibly can.
yeah, well, I appreciate that, Roland.
Oh, well, no, when we got more plans for that in the future. Well, I'm going to wrap up this recording in just a second. If you could stay on for one more second, though, I have a request for you. But
sure.
So okay, the first 4 chapters are out. Part 1 is out. There are things that people can will be able to watch, like your video that's coming out next week, Tuesday, you said, right?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. So what's the plan for the summer? How can we base our summer around this book?
Well, it's the episodes drop every 2 weeks, so it's gonna go through the summer into September before it finally ends, and then in between all that, there's gonna be something, in between every episode.
That's wonderful. And then the physical books land in October,
early October.
Yes, and hopefully you'll have a launch in London, and hopefully we can have a launch in America. That would be amazing.
We'll see. All right.
Oh, well, thank you so much for taking the time to speak to you. I am so excited about this, Raymond. I think it's just wonderful. I have not been as excited about a book coming out in years.
Well, I appreciate your enthusiasm, and I thank you for it.
Oh, in fact, some of the books I used to get excited about when I was a teenager for my birthday, my parents would bring me the Raymond Benson James Bond books that came out, like the Union trilogy and stuff like that. And now I'm getting that same level of excitement, except I actually get to speak to the author. So,
that's good. I'm pleased.
Oh, well, thank you so much for doing so. I'm going to get this out to as many people as I can as possible, and yeah, this is not going to be the last we wind up talking about this book, because I think it is a big thing amongst all James Bond fans right now.
All right, well, thank you for having me on.
Oh no, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.